If you haven't followed the podcast yet and don't know who I am, I'm Chris Wright, the head of the Pubs Advisory Service. I provide insights into the UK pubs trade, I speak with other experts, and I share experiences and stories from publicans across the country. Along the way, we'll explore different pubs, how they're run, and speak with their operators. Podcasts are released weekly, and you can contribute to the podcast using WhatsApp. Just message us on 07766073815. Leave your story in the form of a voice message or voice note. 5 minutes is approximately the maximum time limit. If you get cut off or have a longer story, just message back and continue where you left off. Please include as much detail about your experience as possible and avoid recording in noisy places or a moving vehicle. If you run a pub business, I highly recommend subscribing to the Pubs Advisory Service. It's the most extensive pub service, offering more than just representation. We have online calculators, document banks, and other resources for those interested in or already running a pub business. You can even claim the cost of subscribing back as a business expense. Some of the WhatsApp content will make it to special episodes of our podcast, exclusive only to subscribers of the Pubs Advisory Service. This paid subscription also gives you early and advert-free access to our episodes, plus online sessions where I answer your questions about the industry. Hello, this is Chris once again from the Our Pubs podcast. Today I'm joined by Phil Dixon. I've known Phil quite a long time. He's been described in lots of different ways. I think industry guru is the one that seemed to stick. I mean, yeah. Phil, you've had a long career. I think it started way back in 1979. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was a debate at the National Licensed Victuallers Council about breweries and graduate recruitment. And the gist of it was, we got no chance now. They're getting these whiz kids in out of university. And somebody at the back of the room apparently put their hand up and said, why don't we get a whiz kid? And I was the one they approached.
You're the whiz kid?
Yeah. It wasn't Billy the Whiz, I'm never that quick. But it was, would I like to come? I mean, I remember they approached me. I remember the interview saying, what do I have to do? Oh, you need to go out and visit probably two members' pubs a day to look at their issues and their cases, their rent reviews. We'll give you a car, expenses. The salary was a lot more than my mates were getting going into graduate recruitment at the time. And I got a daughter. And I thought, well, spend every day visiting two pubs. Oh, okay, I think I'll give that a go. And
you were sold.
I was sold, yeah. I mean, the one thing I actually did say, I remember at the time saying, I mean, some of my colleagues, and they're all probably dead now, I mean, they would actually have a beer with the member. And one thing I remember is they saying, there's no way I'm drinking alcohol when I'm doing this job. And when I used to ask for a bitter lemon, back in the day, there was this look of consternation on the member's face. Yeah, a bitter lemon. Yes.
Oh my God. Well, I suppose the modern equivalent is kombucha or something like that.
Probably, yeah. And then, of course, and that led to whatever, and I finished up as the membership director at the BII, and then I spent most of my last working period as an advisor to the BII.
Yeah. Well, I think that's how we met. I'm a bit hazy. I think it was a sunny May 2007 or 8. I was invited to the BII by a mutual friend, David Morgan, and and I bumped into you, or Morgan's introduced me to you, and we kind of have been talking ever since, really. And I remember us sharing, obviously, some of the the caseload, I suppose it's fair to say, from the BI's helpline, and that was an interesting phase.
Yeah, I did that for 3 years. I mean, Mike List does it now, and Mike is brilliant. I mean, his level of expertise is unparalleled. I suppose I should say I was invited 3 times to give evidence in my own right to a parliamentary select committees and the European Commission in Brussels. So I probably ought to know what I'm talking about. But then I am from Yorkshire, so bullshitting comes natural.
I think they have a competition, possibly in a pub. the tall tales.
I need to share something with you.
Yes,
there's a law firm in Hull who did enterprises litigation called, you must be aware of, Goschalks, yeah?
Yes, indeed.
You must have made them hundreds of thousands over the last 20 years. But I bet you've never been to their head office for a mediation meeting. And if you did, I've got to show you this. The Goschalk pen.
You got a Goschalk's pen?
Best pens in the sector, Chris. I had half a dozen on the way out.
Well, I've never had the pleasure or displeasure of meeting Goss Chalks in their offices. So, but yeah, you and me can swap a ton of stories about the trade. And in fact, the reason I got you on this podcast today was to talk about an issue that has been bubbling up and it doesn't show any signs of going away. And we've loosely titled it the managed model. And
Yeah.
what we mean by that is not the Weatherspoons, it's not the big chains managed houses. We're talking about a managed model that is normally for an individual operator, maybe a couple, and they contract with a pub company or a brewer who own the pub, and they begin this relationship. And it's very separate from leased and tenanted. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a whole new discussion you and me could have on that side. But we're going to just focus today on the managed models and what we've seen, what we've understood from them, perhaps where the pros and the cons lie within this particular thing, because it's undoubtedly a feature of the trade. And when you and me first sort of met back in the noughts, it wasn't a feature of the trade, but it is now. It is now, and there's a lot of people in it. And I hesitate to say. I mean, what's your view of the scale of it, Phil? Do you think there's more than 1,000 operators in these models?
No, there's more than that now, Chris. It's probably around about 1,600. It's 22% of the big 6 estates, and it's growing every day. There's 3 reasons. I mean, you've got to remember, this model actually was introduced into the industry, although it was always there with some of these little operators.
Yeah.
Marston's were the proponent of it, and I got some of the blame for this. I've been to Marston, and your viewers need to know that when you say Marston's, you're really meaning Wolverhampton Dudley.
You do.
Yeah, Wolverhampton Dudley took over Marston's when Marston's tried to take over Wolverhampton Dudley. And some people, including myself, said, well, which one's got the better name? What does Wolverhampton Dudley excite people in Dorset? and they changed the name to Marston's. And I was in their office in Wolverhampton on a not particularly pleasant day, but it's Wolverhampton, so that doesn't narrow it down. We were talking about risk and reward. It was a horrible February day. The roads are icy, and I was just saying something like, every one of your tenants is losing money today. No one's going to be in the pub tonight. It's not safe. Blah 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 blah. And they had a problem with their bottom end tenancies. They just couldn't let them, and they weren't sustainable with the model. And so that started it. And the problem they had was, when you offer somebody 20% of the take, if the take is hardly existent, 20% are not a lot, is not great. So they then had to work on doing some sort of investment in the pubs. That then really was the start and the catalyst. And then Enterprise, as you know, Enterprise had this beacon thing with low cost, and then that morphed into Craft Union.
Yeah.
And initially, Craft Union would target Weatherspoons pubs and undercut them. And I remember going into one in my native South Yorkshire. I've been home to see my mum, and it was undercutting the local Weatherspoons. And I walked in, and I got to be honest, Chris, I felt totally out of place. I still had my own teeth. It was really rough, and they were giving Sky and BT Sport at the time. So hang on, you're providing Sky and BT Sport and undercutting Weatherspoons. Where's the economic model there? And that's developed. The only thing I like about Craft Union is the consumer doesn't think it's Enterprise Inns or Stonegate. They think it's a separate pub company.
It's got its own branding. Yeah. I mean, it's fair to
say they don't give the Stonegate publican round the corner grief. Marston's has the same branding on the tenancies and lease as they do on their retail agreements. That causes issues for the tenant where they get abused by their regulars because, well, you've been overcharging us for the last 5 years if they can do it round the corner for £1.50 cheaper.
There's a direct comparison that the consumer can make there. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's interesting to say, as you said, this thing has developed and there's been various name changes. And obviously we may band around some of these names in the course of this discussion, but largely we're referring to the same thing. In fact, thinking way back for myself before, I even became aware of like the Marston's retailer model and Craft Union or any of that. Friends of mine in Sussex used to refer to it as the Irish model. And largely because actually, if you went to Southern Ireland, there was an awful lot of pubs which were rented out on the basis of a cut of the till. Yeah. And that was it. So the people actually serving you, your pint of black there in Ireland, they were on a cut of the till, and it was a very popular model there. And it actually had a kind of a version of its own down on the south coast in Brighton and Hove, where there was not only a contractor running the front of house, but there was a separate contractor running the kitchen.
Yeah.
So there was kind of a model within the model, which seemed to work in, at least in the city of Brighton and Hove. But I wasn't too aware of that happening elsewhere. It just seemed to be particular there. So talking about these models, so Marston's, as you say, entered the fray.
About 2009, actually.
2009. So there's some copycatting that starts to begin. Other pub companies looking at this, and they all have a similar issue. And as you say, the branding of these, for some of the pub companies, separates. So you get Craft Union, as you say, it's quite noticeable. It's very different. It's distinct. It's got a kind of a vibe. And Marston's stick with similar branding. But am I right in saying, Phil, that all of these managed models are all price sensitive models? These are all aimed at, low prices, guaranteed low price, good value. Is that where they're at? Do they position themselves there?
I think they would say they're all value for money.
Value for money.
That's the phrase they use, Chris. Not
VFMs. VFMs. Yeah.
What annoys me, and I'll be polite and not say what pisses me off, is that when I'm doing I still get dragged out of retirement to advise on rents. When
you are retired, yeah.
Yeah, I am retired. Yeah, not available at the moment.
No.
When you're talking to a pub code surveyor about a tenant and lease rent, it's we think he could be charging more for his product, and therefore we're not sure he really ought to be having Sky and TNT Sports. Does he really need 4 televisions? And then they then do a capex project on a pub about 2 miles away for one of these models. First thing they do is drop the prices. Next thing they do is put TNT and Sky in, and then they put 9 tellies in the pub. So there's this sort of complete hypocrisy. I don't think, in fairness to the models, they're as cheap as they used to be.
Okay.
I think they're.
Well, you mean they found their limit and they realised it was too low?
Well, it's a bit my point. If you just give it away, who do you get into your pubs? You know, who wants to go into a pub? It's a bit like, if people are watching this, they're contemplating taking a pub. The one thing they'll have to do when they take the pub on is work out who's going to come in the pub who was previously barred for their behaviour.
Okay.
And make sure they deal with that, because if you let a individual in who's got a reputation for, let's say, violence, then you've actually allowed a sales prevention officer into your pub who will then drive other people away.
Yeah. So managing. Yes. So do you find that where these models have been imposed, it's actually attracted a different user base, a different customer base that's come in? Do you think it's been that much of a shift, when you see these sites?
Probably not in the case of, say, Admiral Tavern's proper pubs, because they're basically traditional pubs. That's just putting someone in with support who can make a good offer. I mean, what I like about this model is basically it's about, I think it was the guy from Amber Tavern said we want human capital. They want personalities,
right.
And then don't worry about all the complications of the business. We'll deal with it. So you can put people in pubs who would be put off by the amount of, if you like, paperwork. But they've got the personality to run a pub.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, let's face it. No, I don't think anyone gets into the pub games because they love paperwork.
Yeah, well,
so anyone that's promising to remove, what is a significant burden, I think, on all business owners, the paperwork and the admin side, is obviously going to be an attraction. So let's talk about the advantages, if you like, the pros to this model. So there is outwardly a promise to take away paperwork, yeah? And when we mean paperwork, we also mean invoicing, purchasing, paying the gas bill, electric bill.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was Chris Jousey who said recently, the magic of the model for me is that we take away all the hassle that comes from running a pub.
All of that, apart from the staff. Apart from the staff. We'll come on to that. We'll come on to that.
Yeah.
So okay, so they're taking away the hassle, and the hassle, we can largely say the advantage of this model is to remove all this administration, paying all these bills, paying the business rates, etc., and the TVs, like you say. So they're doing all of that for you. Did they also include the maintenance, Phil? Are they expecting you to do any repairs, or is all of that?
No, in not nearly all cases, no repairs at all.
But cleaning is definitely down to the operator.
Yeah.
Cleaning is.
well, the cleaning will be done by the person. This model only works, and there's no way around this, Chris. I mean, I spoke to a former executive of one of the major companies, and I said, this model, he said, well, no, I'm never comfortable with the fact that you've got to work yourself into an early grave to actually make some money. It is. I mean, you've got to. The numbers are such that if you take one of these models on, the con is you have to work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
There's no, there's no.
Well, we'll come straight onto that in
Yeah.
a sec. We'll finish off any other advantages that
you
we
do
can
the cleaning,
see.
basically.
So the livery, the branding, and all of that, that's all taken care for. You can't
Yeah,
put any personality. You can't put a personality here. Do they also handle all the till systems, all the back office?
Everybody has EPOS systems. Yeah. The con of this model is that the stock taker becomes God.
That's an interesting point.
Everything is about the stock take.
So actually, one of the
takes aren't right, you get fired. I'm not going to single companies out because I've only read one agreement in detail when they asked me to, and it was something like, if we say your stocks are down and we fine you, you have no recourse to, you can't appeal it. So, and yeah, I was interviewing a couple. They're on the Punch video. They're in Chichester, and they said they have the odd issue with stock, but the company are very sort of flexible and sympathetic. But in other companies, if you drop a bottle of wine in the cellar, which costs, let's say, costs £5 as a £5 plus VAT as a wholesale cost, you're actually fined for the retail cost less the VAT. So you're penalised for. Yeah, so and I suppose what the argument the pub codes would say, well, if they aren't onerous in this area, everybody would be drinking the wine. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, let's just to wrap up the advantages. So, are the agreements cheap to get into, Phil? Is there any upfront?
Yeah. You basically typically, well, it's if you craft union, it's £2,000 deposit. Although, and even if it's proper pubs, it can be less than that. And if you haven't got it, you can build it up. Punch are at 4, Jat are at 4-star, and Marston's are at 5. The Green King entry for their Hive agreements, and these are pubs where Green King have spent a lot of money on. That's a £5,000 non-returnable fee. So
everyone else promises to have a kind of a bond that is possibly returnable, and then, as you say, Green King is like, no, it's 5K.
Because that includes all the training, but then all the other brands have to have training as well.
Fine. So all right. I think we're pretty clear on the advantages here. They're pretty much giving you a plug and play pub that's fully compliant. In your understanding, is the upstairs done? I mean, is the accommodation up to spec, or is that just left as is? What do you think of that?
Well, I don't know, but they do advertise it with the fact that the accommodation.
They do, yeah. I mean,
it's got
that one.
I mean, you know this from where you're geographically based. I mean, to offer a couple with a family a 2 to 3 bedroom flat for free, that's really a fundamental part of the offer. That's the attraction, because if you've got free accommodation as part of this model, what are you saving? I mean, you remember your nemesis, Mr. Ted Tuppin, used to talk about the value of the living accommodation.
Oh, the live above. Yeah. 10,000, 14,000. I can't remember what he said. It was definitely 5 figures.
It started at 10, didn't it?
It started at 10. Yeah.
Whatever happened to we will guarantee a minimum income of 20,000, which he said do you remember he said that in 2003? Yeah, all enterprise tenants we will ensure a minimum of 20,000. Wonder where that would be with inflation. Anyway,
48. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, that reminds me of the sort of golden threads, isn't it, of a certain famous regulator? You know, they disappeared. So the advantages. I think we've covered pretty much what's attractive about this offer. The accommodation, as you say, I haven't heard anything to the contrary as to whether or not upstairs is in good nick or not. But
I think in fairness, I think the answer is they claim it is.
They claim it is. Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll park that one. So. Let's talk about the disadvantages of this model, and specifically, you've touched upon a couple of points. One of them you mentioned was stock taking. You said stock taker is God.
Yeah.
So, this is the power of life and death, or what are we talking about?
The disadvantages of it is there's no security. There's very little security. So if your face doesn't fit, or It makes me laugh when you get these people saying, "Well, we asked the tenant whether they're happy with their relationship." If you're let me choose my words carefully. If you're watching the BBC News and there's a sort of report from a somewhere where there's a military dictatorship has taken over, and they spot a citizen in the street and say, "Are you happy with the new regime?" They don't actually say. They don't say no, and then
there may be some confirmation bias going on there.
Yeah,
I understand. Yeah.
no,
Okay.
when you're on 12 weeks, notice.
Is that typical? So let's talk about so there's a disadvantage. The
3 months.
notice period to get you out if things don't work out. Let's say you don't like the deal, or they don't like you for whatever reason, or there's some sort of dispute, minor or major. You can just give notice. There's no quibble notice. You can just off and out.
Yes, it depends on the agreement, but the maximum will be 6 months. So you can be out of this agreement within 6 months. If you breach the agreement, obviously it could be instant. If you suddenly
forfeiture of, as you say, a clear breach.
But typically it's 3 months the other way. They can give you 3 months notice.
Okay, so you're precarious.
Yeah,
so you don't
want we do have that in tenanted and lease. Tenants, the majority of tenancies are no longer secure since the Pubs Code, and tenants. I had one last year where a tenant got 3 months' notice because he basically didn't get on with the BDM, and the company gave him 3 months' notice. Says, "Well, why have you given this guy notice?" Well, we don't need to give a reason. So you get so
they can be very. They can present themselves as a long-term prospect to the operator, but actually have a very short-term exit. And I agree. I think a lot of these managed models that we're focusing on today, lease and tenanted, does have its issues, and that's definitely for another podcast. These particular models, you're right. There is often a notice period of somewhere between 3 to 6 months that says, goodbye. So anyone coming in must have a very short-term view on this as well. You don't want to get too comfortable because notice could just be done.
I think if I had something on my shoulder, it would be somebody from Green King saying they can't give notice unless there's breach.
There may be some variation within that.
This is their Hive concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
But because these are massive spirit pubs they didn't know what to do with, and they've spent a lot of money on them. And if somebody comes in and they want to make it clear that unless they breach their agreement, if they want to stay, they can.
It goes for the term.
But the vast majority will be.
Yeah, I think the majority have a notice period, and as you say, there may be some variation within that, where there's no notice period. It's just the term of that agreement, and obviously the shorter. One would argue that's you living out of a suitcase. I mean, as you and me both know, there was a period of time in this industry where there was a lot of bust-in managers who would circle around the industry living out of a suitcase. 1 week they'll be running a pub in the Midlands, then they'll be running one in Norwich, and then they'll be off to London. And, there were people sort of hopping around from one pub to the other, literally living out of a suitcase because there was no security of tenure. So, no, actually, just before we get right into the disadvantages, we didn't talk about the cuts, the actual take. What percentages, what cut of the till are you seeing, or you understand that these deals offer?
I think it starts at 18.5, which is proper pubs. They would want me to say, there's plenty of bonuses there. Craft unions 20% plus bonus. Then it varies. Some of them don't say, but they say privately it's 24, 25. Marston's, what's interesting about these models, Chris, is they're in competition with each other. So they're ever developing. So, Green King's Hive guaranteed an income to the 20 grand to the tenant plus a percentage of. And I remember interviewing Green King and said, the issue you got with these percentages is what happens if you want a food turnover, because the cost of labour to produce a food turnover is greater than simply providing labour behind the bar. So if you say, for example, it's 24%, well, that might cover typically the costs of running a wet lead bar. Yeah. It doesn't come near to the current costs of a kitchen, particularly if you have to employ that 4-letter word, a chef. Because chefs at the moment, after COVID, there was a shortage of chefs because guess what? They found jobs where they didn't have to work weekends and got as much money. And
Yeah.
that's an issue.
It
The
certainly is. In fact, just on that percentage, I mean, I've said it in the past, I'm sure you have, it's cheaper to put out a pint than a plate. It's
Yes,
absolute fact in the pubs world. So yeah, if you're looking to take a cut of the sales, and those sales are based on plates, not pints, then obviously it's going to cost you more to put that out in the first place. So there is definitely something to be said about the food-led versions of this, and whether or not there are deals within deals, so different percentages for food sales as opposed to drink.
Marston's new community food-led pubs, though they're food-led,
Yeah.
they give the operator 26% of the turnover
Okay. Yeah.
and 35,000 a year. So
Right.
basically, you could translate that, which says you're going to earn 35 grand, but then you're going to have to work in the
So,
kitchen.
and just to underline this cut of the till system, as you say, there seems to be some floors being put in. So some of the models are now developing a floor, a ceiling, if you like, or a cap, cap and collar, whereby you can't go below a certain amount of earnings. But the earnings they're talking about there, is that for a couple, Phil?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So 35 between two people is the minute. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I suppose they would say, well, that's for the individual operator, but the presumption, as always, Chris, is the economics work better when there's a couple.
Well, they do for one party.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, they sent me. I was sent to interview two former deputy heads who'd given up their jobs because they wanted to try. They loved providing food during COVID. They'd done like a pop up for their community, and they really
Okay.
wanted to try it. And I went in on one of these models, and the lady started. I mean, they had given up their deputy headships. It was in a place called Willenhall, so you probably don't know Willenhall. So
No.
I couldn't understand it. And the lady talked about the three chefs she was employing.
Three.
Three, yeah,
Just three.
just three. And I just sort of went, what? And 6 months later they weren't there.
Mm.
Because of the labour costs, and it's particularly if they're employing them, if you like, on the books, with the national. And the other thing about this model is, I mean, the Rachel Reeves national insurance hike, that's accelerated managed houses going to this model. Yeah, that's been a cause, and of course the other reason why there's so much of this model is down to you.
Yes.
It's
So, I mean, surely you're not.
it's avoiding market rent options. So
Don't knock me off my socks, Phil. But surely you're not saying that this model is a way of avoiding national insurance. You're not saying that, are you? Is that? You said it accelerated a move away, but is that because the national insurance issue is now the issue of the contractor? It's not the pub company. If we look at pure managed estates, that is the responsibility of the company, yeah. And then they move this pub.
Well, yes, put it this way: Stonegate bought Enterprise Inns to. I mean, remember the thing about Ted Tupping was he always said they'll never have managed houses in Enterprise Inns, and Stonegate saw a whole load of potential managed houses when they purchased it. The fact it was like 3 weeks before COVID was just bad. It was a bit of bad luck on their part. But now, because of rising costs, they're transferring them back to leased and tenanted and to Craft Union. And yeah, the costs of running a managed house with paying the staff a salary, holiday pay, sickness pay, national insurance, pension is a contributory factor to transferring pubs to this model.
Okay. All right. Well, we've covered the financial bit, I think the cuts and the splits and all that. So let's think about these other potential cons or disadvantages that come into this model. Are you a publican navigating the choppy waters in the UK pub industry, or perhaps you're looking to get into the trade for the first time? The Pubs Advisory Service is here to help. We provide essential advice and support, from licensing and legal queries to tenancy agreements and business growth strategies. Want to unlock exclusive insights, in-depth guides and all our past podcast episodes, including hidden extras? Subscribe to Pass today.
Membership gives you unparalleled access to expert advice, ensuring your pub thrives. Visit pubs.expert to learn more and subscribe. Don't miss out. Empower your pub business with Pubs Advisory Service.
So one of them, as you say, is the stock taking. Is that because you as the operator have got no third party reconciliation? You've got no control over the stock. It's all managed within the EPOS system.
Yeah, I think it's that's the crucial thing. For the model to work, things have got to be run tight and professionally, and
Right.
therefore you can understand why there is a very high emphasis on the stocks.
So would you say that that amounts to very close supervision? I mean, it sounds to me just on the stock alone, it's very supervised, digitally, a bit remote.
Yeah.
But what about the day-to-day operation? Are you finding and understanding these models that people have someone from the head office or regional manager coming in and keeping the business operating at a certain standard, at a certain level? Is there lots of checks and balances there? Are you being looked at constantly, monitored constantly?
I think locally, if you were a BDM looking after tenancies, you probably have 45 pubs to look after on your area, or 40 to 50.
Yeah.
And if it's on these models, it's more nearer 12 to 15, that sort of number.
So there's way more hands-on supervision.
And I mean, I wrote about my local Star BDM because they spent 300 grand on a pub that, let's just say, had a dodgy reputation. And by dodgy, we're talking it was known as a place where the drug dealers would be outside. People would avoid it. And
it can happen.
And in fairness, the Heineken spent 300 grand on the site. And I said to my local Star BDM, well, if it works, I'll write nice things about it, because this is a and in fairness to Heineken, they are spending money on pubs, Chris, that no other pub company would risk, because it's basically they can, because they're Heineken. They're not some venture capitalist based in Texas who's watching every penny.
No, they got 500 years of trading behind them and billions in the bank.
Not quite. I think it's I often tease my local family brewer, who's got about 11 pubs, that how come Heineken are much bigger than you? They only started. No, it's Budweiser I tease them with. Budweiser were founded 8 months before you, but you've only got 11 pubs. And in fairness, it worked, but and the but is this: it worked because the BDM in this case had a background in catering, in like pizza, in managed houses. So he had his finger on the pulse of the food offer, and took a very hands-on approach. And the relationship was a managed relationship. He would say, "This is what I want you to do," and the person running the pub would say, "Okay."
Well, let's tip into this disadvantaged situation. You're getting a cut of the till. What are you meant to spend that money on? What is expected? You're meant to reward yourself.
Yes.
Right. Fine, but you're meant to buy staff, right? You're meant to hire them in yourself. That's the crux of it, isn't it?
Yes.
So anybody that's got 2 legs, 2 hands, and a pulse, actually, that's your responsibility. So you take on this deal, you get your cut of the sales, and for the cut of the sales, you've got to put sufficient numbers of warm bodies in that pub to run those services, whatever they are.
Your only other overheads are to ensure you've got public liability and council tax in the main. You pay.
So assuming you have council tax for the upstairs, all right, fine.
And yes, you're responsible for the staff. You're also, in law, responsible for offences under, say, trading standards, consumer protection, licensing. So you're taking on that responsibility.
Okay.
So the staffing is the main issue. You have to pay the staff, and therefore there is no relationship between the pub owning body and the staff that you employ.
So given that you're not choosing the deal, you're not choosing the beers, you're not choosing the food you put out, you're not choosing the prices, you're not choosing the decor, you're not doing any personalization, you are actually just a recruitment company. You're just recruiting people, yourselves, even perhaps your husband and wife, to staff a pub for this company. That's in I think raw terms what the deal is, isn't it? If we strip away the sales talk, you're a recruitment company. You're a tiny little recruitment company for one pub. Yeah.
And you're avoiding all the staffing costs that would be associated with a traditional managed.
So the actual property owner He's
Yes.
not having that. So in a way, they have transferred their staffing issues to you as a micro recruiter. Okay, so there's a thing there. If you're not big on recruiting people, and let's say you're not happy with being closely supervised and monitored, this probably isn't going to be the deal for you, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be an issue because you're going to be looked at and scrutinized, and you're going to have to deal with a lot of people issues. You're not actually going to have an HR manager supplied by the company. That's you. That's your job.
And listening to the, I think Marston's and Punch, they've recognised that what the model doesn't attract is people who want to be creative with food. Because they're saying, typically, I mean, you take the Green King Hive model, that's addressed the issue of food and cost by providing a pizza oven, a freezer, and a cardboard box.
Right.
So that's the food offer.
So very.
So Marston's and Punch, Marston's Pillar and Punch's MC2 agreements, they're where the couple do their own food, do what they want. They do their own.
So they got freedom there
Total freedom to do their own food, and then they pay of the food turnover. They pay a percentage back to Marston's or Punch of what they're doing, and of course it's all through the EPOS system.
Yeah,
so that does allow. I mean, the frustration I think in the model for people who want to do decent food in a pub is there's a lack of creativity.
This feels like grab and go or assembly type food. It's that kind of deal, right? Grab and go assembly food. It's easy.
No. This is more people who want to do sort of, I think, more high end food.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I'm just saying this offer attracts people who perhaps have limited skill sets and can do grab and go, can do that kind of offer. You're right. It's
fish and burgers and that's sort of in the main is the main. I think the weakness of some of the offers is that you don't. I mean, I remember I think one of the models where the cheapest entry point is like a 12 quid burger. Well, you want to go in a pub, might just want a sandwich. So there's a little bit of inflexibility in the food offer in certain areas. But of course, don't forget, I mean, you take the Admiral offer, there's no food at all. Well, apart from crisps and nuts. And they don't do Twiglets.
They've lost your vote.
No, they've lost my Jules. My Jules won't go into a pub if it doesn't do Twiglets.
You'll be wanting cups of Bovril next, Phil. Honestly.
Oh, why not? Yeah.
So, okay, joking aside, let's just focus on this particular issue there. So, the food offer is awkward if you've got some entrepreneurial spirit, want to do something different. There may be a couple of options out there for you to have free hand and do something particularly free. As we say, you're very restricted in lots of ways. You have to get permission for everything, pretty much, if you want to go outside of the box. The box that's been drawn for you. That stops you, dead in your tracks. So, kind of what I'm thinking here is that, with regards to the way that this is being set up, is that indeed the human elements have been stripped out from the pub, and you become responsible for all the human elements now. And you're getting this cut of the till. I think I want to ask you this question: is the cut of the till enough to staff the pub to the level that you would expect? What?
Well, all you've got to go on there is actually the British Beer and Pub Association classic benchmarking statistics, which are always out of date, but they would indicate it's not, because I had a spat with a local surveyor. Spat is the wrong probably way, but they're clinging on to the fact that you could run a kitchen on 29% of turnover, and I'm saying no, talk to people. It's now more like 35, 36 percent, because wages have gone up. And I mean, here where I live up here on the South Staffordshire border, Hickory's Smokehouse is a good pair, and pays above minimum wage. But that has a knock-on effect where publicans have to maintain that, increase their wages, or they lose staff. I mean, washing pots in a pub, Chris, isn't the greatest occupation. But why would you wash pots in a pub for, let's say, £13 an hour when you can wash pots in a pub for £16 an hour, which is only a mile away? So there's a lot of competition amongst the kitchen staff in this particular area. I think that's across the country. So no, it only works if the partners are prepared to basically do 7 days a week, unless of course the pub takes off. You could say, well, if the pub takes off, and I mean the point Craft Union would make to me and you would be that their pubs mostly trade well above 10 grand a week. So there is a remuneration there, which you might be able to factor in to basically have a day off. But was it ever any different? Most tenants work 7 days a week. So,
this is true. This is a 7 day a week trade, and a lot of operators, as we know, don't have or draw sufficient holidays. Sometimes never. Largely there's a problem of leaving the pub in control of somebody else. And I don't know whether these.
We used to actually have holiday relief in the rent calculation, because the assumption was, and we used to have arguments with companies about how much holiday should your tenant take a year, and was it 3 weeks or was it 4 weeks back in the day, and there would be a box in the calculation for holiday relief. That's disappeared. There used to be a box. There used to be a box in the calculation for guard dogs. And I must admit, I always said if a guard dog was essential to a pub, Enterprise Inns would have tied for Alsatians.
Tied for Alsatians, yeah. Oh dear, I can see that. I mean, with this model has clearly been growing. I mean,
it's not stopping. It's continuing to grow.
It's hard to say whether that's popular or it's just a lack of choice, because obviously if you're entering the market and in fact the major pub companies or the major groups, all they offer is this kind of model, you don't have a choice. You don't really have the ability to say, well, actually, I would like a different model. It's take it or leave it, right? It's a bit of a walkaway sort of deal.
Well, on certain pubs, but the other side of that argument is, do I want to try a pub where I'm not going to lose my life savings? I'm going to get some income. I'm going to get free accommodation. It's probably the better option to try than have to commit to a tenancy. There's no ingoing. You don't have to buy the fixtures and fittings. I mean, the other side of I discussed with a guy I was trying to help out, who was a retired decorated policeman up in the northeast. And I suggested they might transfer his pub to one of these models, and he just didn't want the relationship where he had to do what he was told to do every day, which coming from a policeman seemed a bit strange, because he's probably had 30 years of that. But may well be the
sick
reason.
And tired of it.
Yes. It is what it is. The downside is, you have to do things in a certain way, but the upside of it is, you don't risk your life savings.
And just want to chuck this out there as an idea. You mentioned the stock is God a little earlier, and I was just thinking about this. So if the stock goes missing, is broken, consumed, and doesn't go through the till, and obviously the pub company is wanting their cut of that, they're billing you at retail for that item. They're billing at retail.
Not every company, but yeah, some of them do. Yeah,
some of them are billing at retail. So that you could, if stock isn't monitored effectively, you could end up owing the company money, right?
Yeah. Yes, theoretically, yeah. I think I've only heard of it a couple of times, but it has happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a number of people coming forward through some of the social media groups that I've been involved with that have. That's exactly what they've laid down, is that, stock has varied wildly. One day it was correct and a week later it was wrong. And this has resulted in demands for money, big money, thousands of pounds, not a fiver, not a bottle of wine, put it that way, but, significant sums. Has there, what happens to the sort of the repair of the pub? You mentioned the company has to repair it. That's one of the advantages. Yeah. But if you leave and it's sort of in a bit dilapidated, we all know these buildings take a hammering. Whose responsibility is that, as far as you're aware? What is that for?
In all cases, it's the company. There's no dilapidations here. Which, looking at the present, what I think of the scandal of dilapidations in leased and tenanted, is a good thing, because we're seeing people leaving. We're seeing people leaving leased and tenanted, and the dilapidations is just outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, I'm planning on doing a podcast special about dilapidations and obviously the issue of Section 18.
It's interesting. I found an email from the previous Pubs Code Adjudicator, Mr. Paul Newby,
yep,
saying that yes, dilapidations was a concern and the PCA need to do something about it.
Mm.
There is no email from his successor to indicate there's any interest whatsoever in doing
Well, that's
something.
interesting. Well, let's move from the commercial aspects of this somewhat. Let's move over to sort of regulatory aspects. So let's start with HMRC. What
Yes,
now? My understanding of the HMRC rules are that employment has to be genuine, and self-employment also has to be genuine.
yes,
You have a situation whereby somebody is effectively a pub manager in all but name.
yes.
They're just staffing the pub. That seems to be the only twist in the model, is that everything else is the role of a manager, apart from you're now supplying the staff. So the owner, sorry, let's say the owner, the person that's contracting under this model, yeah, they're getting a cut of the till. They're legally obliged to pay all the staff as per PAYE, national insurance, etc. But actually, they could end up getting nothing themselves, despite having managed this arrangement on behalf of the property owner. But this management concept is kind of distorted somewhat here. Do you think there's a fuzzy edge to this, Phil, or do you think it's clear cut and it actually shouldn't exist? I
No,
mean,
I think I wrote some years ago that if an Uber taxi driver is not self-employed, then what about some of these models? I think it's I think the Inland Revenue will eventually test it. But the but is, I think what the industry has said to Revenue and Customs is look at the millions that these pubs are producing in payments to the Exchequer. Do you really want to mess with that model? I think that's probably the lobbying line they will be taking. It's I suppose they will be intimidated. I mean, to cherry pick a little multiple with 4 pubs and challenge them under IR35. That's one thing. To take on the might of Heineken, that would be another. So I suppose that would be.
well, well, I think just touching on this regulatory issue somewhat, the HMRC, like you say, maybe they've been spoken to, lobbied, whatever. They've taken a view for the moment. You and me did hear a rumor about somebody who
Yeah,
got the knock knock, the old fashioned knock knock from the revenue. And the revenue said, hey, what are you doing? You can't employ people like this under this type of model. And that resulted in, I understand, a fine, substantial fine. And obviously that was a real kicking for that particular person. And that I think that's the only incident you and me both got wind of. Yeah, I don't recall
yeah. I
anything
mean,
else.
I know his accountant, and they had to sell a site to pay the bill.
Hmm.
But we don't know the details other than that. We
No,
don't.
no, fair
No,
enough.
so we would be wrong to presume it was a simple. But you look at the IR35 sort of guidelines, and when what time do you open the pub when the BDM tells me? What price do you charge? What the BDM tells me? Who provides the EPOS system? The BDM. Who provides the food? The BDM. Who
The
decides?
supervision and the control there is very high. It's
It's a
very high.
it's a
Mm.
managed operation.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but the other side of it is, it is keeping pubs open and keeping people employed. Think of the thousands of jobs involved in this model.
There's a flip to that. Actually, just on the subject of jobs though, because there's something that recurs to me, and you mentioned that some of these pubs were formerly in the managed division, so they were run by those breweries, run by those pub companies,
Yeah.
employed everybody, and then they've become this model. Now, this is, I mean, Phil, you're a bit of a union man. 2P, surely if that pub was managed by a pub company,
And
and then the staff are now underneath the new self-employed manager. They've been 2P'd over, haven't they, with all the liabilities?
yes, yes, you would
So, so
you would have to
somebody,
presume you'd have to presume that that would be the case.
so
Yes.
somebody with a 90-day contract, maybe only 90 days, has potentially taken on a 2P liability that
Yeah.
could be massive. It could be
Yes.
massive.
Yes.
That is definitely a disadvantage.
That
Something,
would be, yeah. It would. I
yeah.
mean, that's a good point. I mean, if you take on one of these sites, what are you taking on? I mean, to my surprise, I mean, there's a local pub which was a Marston's, and it was a pitcher and piano, and so that would have been a top end managed house, and that's going to this model. So yeah, there are those pubs of that stature.
So, okay. So, I mean, we're picking up on some regulatory issues here. 2P's a big one. The
Yeah,
HMRC's view on this model may change,
may
and
do.
that could have ramifications. It could end the model. It may not mean there's any liabilities to the contractor, but it might mean that the pub companies or the brewers receive a liability there. So there are a lot of
Just to cut across you there, the one thing you do know is that these pub companies won't have they will have done a risk assessment on HMRC. And they wouldn't be investing millions in in these particular models if they didn't feel that they were a bit bulletproof from an HMRC.
I think it's fair to say, you don't make that level of investment without undertaking some form of due diligence. But then
Yeah,
again, we know there are these sort of regulatory blind spots which actually allow things to proliferate, models to get a grip. So on the subject of regulatory stuff, so the other sort of player in this sector is the Pubs Code Adjudicator, because as we've been discussing, the main delivery of these models comes from the big six pub companies, right? Mostly.
yeah,
There are obviously, like we discussed, some private individuals that obviously have done it in a small way. But the big six, who are regulated by the PCA, Fiona Dickey is the current head, it's her role to look at models that are maybe avoiding the pubs code. That is actually written in statute. That is of an act of parliament. So what's her view on this? Are these models avoiding? Does she even have a view? Do you know?
well, I could phone the Pubs Code Office adjudicator, and hopefully one of the 11 staff plus Fiona would answer the phone, but they don't. I could write to them and ask the question, but they don't reply. So I think I don't know, and I don't think.
Should we call
I
that?
mean, I'm not being blasé about that. I mean, we have.
No.
It seems absolutely incredulous and frankly outrageous that we have a Pubs Code adjudicator who regulates professional behaviour in the industry, but they can't answer the phone or answer emails. So no, I'm not. There's no point discussing something that is hypothetical
Well,
because
I'm glad to hear it's not just you, Phil, that doesn't get a response. And not just me as well.
well, the
You
difference
know,
between you and me, you weren't brought in at the beginning of all this to do an industry awareness course for the staff there, which I did. So not, I mean, just to be not to even have an acknowledgement, and then you talk to the pubcos, and when they write to the Pubs Code Adjudicator, it takes months and months before they get a reply. I mean,
incredible.
the service the industry is getting from the Pubs Code Adjudicator for the millions they're having to pay is. I think I worked it out the other day that the big six have to pay for the Pubs Code about 500 quid a pub. The below 500s, the family brewers, and that to pay to the PGB for the below 500s code and for the industry £16 a pub. And which one's getting the better value?
Well, I think the lack of service is palpable on both sides. I definitely have dealt with issues where both myself or the clients I've represented and the pub companies have been ill served by the regulator's failure to confirm things, simple things, binary things. I think, I want to be not churlish about this, but I think it's fair to say that Fiona Dickey keeps a dignified silence, but she's not paid to keep a dignified silence. And in fact, giving clarity isn't giving advice. And it strikes me that one of the failures here of this particular regulator's office is that they have locally interpreted the responses of their office as advice. They're no such thing. They're just clarity. And there's nothing to stop them doing that. So they're not operating ultra vires by confirming something to a pub tenant or to you or to me. That is actually their job. So there is a distinct failure there. And yeah, I mean, it's disheartening to hear it's an industry-wide problem, and it's not just people like ourselves who have represented and helped publicans and tenants, but also the other side as well. It serves nobody well, and it actually it creates further problems.
It's actually let's not get we'll be coming over as grumpy old men on this one. But I mean, what's interesting for me is that you have never agreed with the likes of pub companies over many years, but on the service you get from the Pubs Code Adjudicator's office, you're in total agreement.
I'm in total agreement. I'll be honest with you, Phil. I have I've had my issues with pub companies and the way that they behave,
Really?
but they're allowed to behave in that way because the market exists for that behavior. So I don't blame them for being and doing what they do. My major ire and my major grumpiness is aimed at regulators, the executive, the government of the day, because where there is unfairness, and palpably there has been unfairness identified by select committees that you and me have taken part in, and also the largest sort of consultation that the business department ever undertook, back in 2013, it outlined how much unfairness this is. And people have continued to report the unfairness, and it's been the executive's job to deal with it, and they don't. And so really my grumpiness is with them. It's not with the pub companies. I'm quite happy to sit down and have a beer and chat with them, but I'm not grumpy.
My last Christmas was ruined by the fact that a company had been selling pubs to a small operator that won't abide by codes of practice, and this guy's mates had their RPI increases immediately reintroduced, their upwards only rent reviews. So I said, get it taken out of your agreement, which took about 7 months, but he did. Day before Christmas Eve, the company wrote to him and tried to put $3,000 on his rent for an RPI increase, even though I thought he'd had it taken out of his agreement. But I couldn't contact his lawyer because she'd gone for Christmas holidays. Okay, so eventually, yes, it was taken out, and they shouldn't have done it, but they did. And I said, look, you've tried to do something illegal here. That's clearly unfair. You've ruined his Christmas, my Christmas. What would Fiona Dickey make of this? And there was just laughter. She couldn't care less, was the answer. So if pub goes no, they can behave like that with no possible comeback.
Well, we expected the referee, when they came onto the pitch, to uphold the rules, right, of the game. If you want to think of people contracting with pub companies, whether in this managed model or in lease and tenanted as a game. But the referee sort of walked onto the pitch, punctured the football, and walked off with the rule book and said, "Have a good game."
Yeah. Yes.
And that doesn't seem to be the purpose or the parliamentary intent. But we could we'll definitely have another podcast that related to this. But Phil, I wanted to end by saying a couple of things. One, I think it's vital that people get advice and take a look at all these models in the round and ask around, get onto some of these groups, speak to people, really uncover, because the model is moving, it's adapting, definitely, it's changing shape. And that doesn't mean it's all bad. As you pointed out, there's some advantages here. Freedom from actually sort of having dilapidations heaped upon you and things like that. So definitely some advantages. There's definitely some disadvantages, and there's some things which are hidden and may not yet have revealed themselves, and that is possibly related to issues surrounding things like 2P and maybe the HMRC. One of the things that occurs to me is that this is something that we should keep under review. I'd like to come back and have more detailed discussion, and anyone that's listening to this who's got some evidence, information, contact the show. We'll put up the WhatsApp number. In fact, you can WhatsApp us anytime on 077 66 07 3815. So you can WhatsApp the show of any evidence you got, and we can obviously come back and review that. If people are kind of willing to send us things, then we can look back at this managed model and dig a bit deeper and uncover some more commentary about it. Phil, I'm going to have to ask you to come back on another show. I'd like you to discuss next time, self-regulation versus statutory regulation. Wow, another exciting story for two grumpy guys.
One final thing, the sort of indication of what are you going to learn from these models. That's that. Now, most of them, to be fair, aren't over ambitious. They just say you'll get 25% or whatever, or 10%, 20%. The one I would take exception with is Punch Taverns, because their prediction on earnings is staggering. And there's a pub up the road from myself here, which I know well because they took me there when they spent some money on it, and it didn't work. It wasn't Punch's fault. They just I think they picked the wrong tenant. However, it's not doing a lot. The rateable value's been non-existent, been 15 grand for the last 10 years. And if you take that pub, you're going to earn 65 to 75,000.
They must be queuing up around the block, Phil.
So give me 4 grand and you can earn 75,000. I mean, does that sound too good to be true? Just a bit. So I would say to people who are if you're, for example, looking at Punch Taverns, they're giving you some eye-watering figures. Say, right, give me a breakdown exactly how I'm going to earn that. And this comes back to when I wrote about these these agreements a couple of years ago, just over 2 years ago, with the Morning Advertiser. Punch had this wonderful pub on the sands at Devon. It looked idyllic, probably is. And you could earn 75 to 80,000. And I said to Punch, I tell you what, if whoever you put in there, if in a year's time they're earning anywhere near 75,000, please let me know and I'll come down and write a piece on it. Mm. The phone hasn't rung, Chris.
That's funny.
Yeah.
We'll definitely end it on that point. But Phil, I'm going to have you back. We're going to do one on self-regulation versus statutory regulation. That'll be a good one. You and me have both got our points of view on what works, what doesn't work in that area. And if time allows, in that same new podcast that I'm thinking of with you, we might do a bit about peers as well, which you've been instrumental in bringing into that self-regulatory world, and how PERS works, or peers, PERS. So it depends which part of the country you live in.
We call it PERS. We call it PERS.
You call it PERS. Some people call it peers. So that model, which has been around a long time, it's been a tool that's been used by a lot of publicans, and I think that's good discussion to have as well. Get into the weeds about that one. So
I do know a bit about that one.
You do know a bit about that one. Thank you very much, Phil, for coming on the show today, and I look forward to chatting to you very soon.
Yeah, cheers, Chris.
Hello once again. This is Chris from Pubs Advisory Service. Thanks ever so much for listening to the podcast, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to get in touch with the show, please use WhatsApp. You can contact us on 077 66 07 3815. That is 077 66 07 3815. You'll also find this number in the links and on our webpage, pubs.expert/podcast. Thanks again.